Good morning, colleagues, and Dr. Yap. I'm here this morning to talk to you about historical role of animals in the emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases in the environment. Well, first off, there's a few levels of interaction, and these levels of action happens as a series of external factors needs to be present or drivers that provides conditions and opportunities that allow for select pathogens to expand and adapt to a new host or niche, as one would say. Now, usually these drivers can occur at the level of ecological, socio-economical, demographic, and there are a few others as well, but these are the most important three for me at this point. The countries that usually are affected by these diseases are the ones that are less able and capable to deal with such crises or epidemics due to either economical constraints, technological constraints, or even that the political unrest or political government is not in support of the control of this disease. Now, each of these drivers need to overlap to some extent for emergence or re-emergence of the pathogen or disease to develop into a new host. This is usually called a spillover, such as what you guys can see here on the right hand side with the leopard and a lot of people. There's a chance of a spillover since these drivers now overlap, such as high economic or high demographic compounding together with a diseased animal. These things happen at different levels. So the pathogen has steps that it needs to be associated with the hosts themselves to be able to cause the disease. Now, the pathogen are sometimes able to skip certain steps, but this involves species-specific host ecological adaptation to that point. Now, as we've read with the pathogen pyramid discussion in one of the papers, is that each needs to lead to the next level, the 4 levels of either emergence, infections, then transmission, and then epidemic occurrence that needs to be happening. Now, the pathogens can migrate by either translocation or dispersal to the vectors or the hosts. To name but a few diseases such as HIV, Ebola, Rift Valley, West Nile virus, Salmonella, brucellosis. These are only but a few, but they have specific interactions. Now, let's take over the HIV, for instance. It had a spillover from non-primates or chimpanzees to humans by the act of human behavior, such as the hunters that utilized the bushmeat or the blood that dripped down their backs of the legs, getting into the situation where blood can actually penetrate and then cause the niche that leads to the situation. Now, the disease then from there spread much faster from human to human via our personal behavior, such as extensive travel and sexual behavior. Now, I'm going to be talking to you about Rift Valley fever at all first. Now, Rift Valley fever is a flavivirus from the Bunyodinidae family. Now, it's an arthropod zoonosis that is an OAV major notifiable disease here in Africa itself. Its primary vector is Aedes, which is a mosquito that can transoverally transmit this pathogen, Rift Valley fever, amongst themselves. And then only in certain opportunities does it actually amplify within a secondary host and then finally actually get to us ourselves. Well, it usually needs a changing epidemical environment which is caused by us that is warm, wet, green, and climatic. Now, usually humans associate and aggregate around what we call here in Africa dambos or marsh type of areas where there's a lot of aggregation of people, livestock, and a lot of food in that. And so these provides those niches that I've spoken of previously to actually lead to it. Now, originally it was only a livestock-associated disease, and it is highly virulent to the livestock, but it can also be highly virulent to human infection. There's usually considerably high fatality rates for the livestock, but less so for the humans. Due to the fact that Rift Valley can be used more mosquitoes, as compared to Ebola and Marburg, for instance, it can has a higher opportunity to actually spread to different countries such as the USA and those. Now, detection is usually done by identification of the virus, culture, histopathology, PRC, or serology, where virus neutralization is the prescribed test for international trade, especially in the endemic areas. Now, looking at the life cycle of Rift Valley fever, as I've discussed previously, there's an enzootic cycle, which is only within the mosquito, the Aedes mosquito itself, where it transmits the virus from the mosquito transferally to its eggs, and the eggs can lie dormant for certain extended of periods or cycles. And then only after, when the conditions are nice, warm, wet, and green, as previously mentioned, can it actually go to the amplification cycle, where susceptible livestock is. Now, in the epizootic epidemic cycle, it amplifies within the host. The mosquito is able to transmit the virus directly to humans or to the animals, where the amplification usually happens in the animals and the exposure to humans happen, and then a secondary vector, including the mosquitoes, such as Culex, and those can also pass the virus from human to animals and human to human as well. So human exposure leads to a viremic situation, which is the activity thereof. So the action of the humans being congregated with their animals and population around these dambos caused the situation. Now, just a quick chronology of Rift Valley fever. It was first discovered in 1931 in a lamb, where the virus was isolated from a district of Kenya, Nakuru district, due to a livestock interface around the dambos. Now, in 1932, usually these were very, very poor rural communities that were affected, as was discussed previously. Thereafter, there was 11 or several other outbreaks during times which had certain time lapses between them. The most significant one was, of course, in 1951 in Kenya, where there was 100,000 mortality in sheep, 500,000 sheep actually aborted, and that was the biggest aspect in the animal side. So, but South Africa, as you can see at the bottom, is all over. It had unpredictable periods of outbreak. Usually an outbreak of Rift Valley fever can be between 5 and 20 years, but given the climatic conditions, especially with the El Nino northern circular oscillation. Now, in 1977-1983, there was a high amount of humans close to the Egyptian Nile Delta that got infected, 18,000 to be precise, of which there was 596 cases of fatality, which was due to the encephalitis and hemorrhagic disorders. Now, it also affected water buffalo and camels in that area. Now, Saudi Arabia was a unique situation where, for the first time, it moved outside of Africa, and that they didn't expect it to move outside of Africa due to human behavior, translocation of animals, translocation and travel of humans that did not show the signs at that point, but then moved over. Now, if we have a look at the two maps that I've got here, you'll see that South Africa is very, very, very high in the numbers of outbreaks, same as Mauritania. But the thing is, the human deaths here are not as much. And I'm also wondering if this is not due to the fact that surveillance in these areas are much, much better as compared to the others, due to the fact that South Africa is a little bit higher economically, politically, and technologically advanced compared to some of the other ones. Now, you'll see also that the spread basically started from, shall I say, Eastern Africa. There's spatial temporal evidence of progressive spread of the Rift Valley fever from that foci in East Africa to the entire continent, further geographically then spread to the Arabian Peninsula. But like I said, it was not expected to happen here. Now, Egyptian outbreak was due to the human contributions due to a dam that was built in Aswan, providing the perfect conditions or the different layers or overlap, as it was said in the first aspect, to actually lead to the outbreak of into the new niche. The attribute to the spread was movement, like I said, of a viremic livestock and transboundary livestock trade, which in the past was usually not present. Okay. Now, I'm going to quickly just use Tanzania as an example. There was a strategy of active collaboration in Tanzania between medical cases, animal cases, and those. And the collaborative surveillance was effective in the case management and diagnosis of Rift Valley fever in humans, and identifying target areas where animal vaccinations could be restricted, animal movement outside the area could be restricted, and they could identify the breeding sites and target the intensive mosquito control programs that has been shown to succeed in limiting the effect of Rift Valley fever outbreak and curbing the spread of the disease further outside these areas. Now, if you have a look, there's dates attached to these and the distance that they spread. The one, of course, being the one that was furthest spread away was the human non-clustered villages of those that actually was in that area, came, bought livestock, and actually traveled or traded. Now, Rift Valley fever is, like I've mentioned, is an OIE, originally a livestock-associated disease only, but it's highly virulent and it has a high impact cost on human and animal health. Humans in the aspect of death and being diseased. The photo on the left-hand side of the two people is the young lady in our country, which actually was a colleague of mine and a friend of mine, Anya, which died from Rift Valley fever, although she took all the precautions and everything else. That, of course, led to the situation where international trade and products and everything was blocked off and led to heavy economic losses within the country from the sale of olives. Now, Rift Valley fever can also be used for bioterrorism. There's a high possibility of that. Now, usually the pastoralists, or the ones with, like I said, the rural, most affected low-income communities are the ones that are greatest impacted with the situation. Now, Rift Valley fever also has the potential to affect countries which it is not in at this point, which have capable vectors to carry the disease, such as USA, where the climatic, environmental, and ecological factors are there to create a larval mosquito habitat and then spread from there. Normal amounts of rainfall could, at this point that we have the change in the environment, and it can lead to that situation. But the timing and interaction of these variables in the United States at this point is unknown, so one's not able to say. Now, management and future protective mechanisms is usually, I would advise, active collaborative surveillance of both the human and the animal. Of course, the one can be an indicative outbreak of the other, but in this aspect, surveillance of the animals is the best situation. Now, vaccination programs for animals are there, but there's nothing for the humans. But it was found that, such as with dengue fever in one of our articles, that also could be carried by Aedes, that the mosquito control programs that was implemented in emergency situations by the country was misdirected and led to little too late to have an impact on the epidemic situation itself. And applying those measures included surveillance, public health planning, education, disaster response plans, which are all essential before an outbreak and should be continuously revised and not just visited at the point of an epidemic. This is as to prevent resurgence of disasters that has economic, social, environmental impacts that can be quite drastic. Now, the best measures in the humans are usually sanitary and medical prophylaxis, such as mosquito nets during the high situations. And then medical prophylaxis is, like I've mentioned, is monitoring and vaccinating the animals as well as monitoring the animals. Now, lessons learned for the future is that active collaborative surveillance is essential in managing epidemic situations such as Rift Valley fever. Planning together with engineers and environmental ecologists and veterinarians before making massive decisions, such as building the dam in Aswan, which led to an outbreak, which led to a high loss of income. Saying never say never, a disease can't get there, such as with the Arabian Peninsula, and mentioning that the United States has the vectors, but one needs to take the precautions to be prepared for the unexpected. Now, improving diagnostic measures and predictive models to determine those are usually at this point lacking and only implemented at a stage where it's too late. Now, we need to vaccinate, develop programs for humans, and then also environmental factors of climate change always need to be taken in consideration to determine if and when outbreaks can be there, and also utilizing the technology such as satellites that can make this predictive models to actually take it from there. Now, Another lesson learned from Rift Valley fever is that, like I've mentioned, certain overflows of one level to the level needs to overlap for the disease to have an outbreak. I'm just mentioning that again because it's of great essence at this point.